I knew my mother-in-law could be difficult. I knew she liked attention. I knew that if a room had 10 people in it, she somehow needed all 10 pairs of eyes on her before the night was over. What I did not know, what I genuinely could not have predicted, was that she would try to turn my son's first birthday party into a public loyalty test with a rusty old car seat from my husband's childhood and then act like I was some kind of monster for refusing to strap my baby into it. And when I say rusty, I do not mean a little old-fashioned. I do not mean vintage. I do not mean sentimental. I mean old enough to look like it belonged in a garage, forgotten under boxes, smelling faintly of dust and storage, with worn fabric, stiff straps, and metal parts that had no business being anywhere near a child, let alone a 1-year-old. That is what she brought to my baby's birthday party, wrapped like it was some priceless family heirloom. And the craziest part is, if she had just handed it to us and said, "This was your husband's when he was little. I thought you might want to keep it for memory's sake," I probably would have smiled, said thank you, and put it in storage or taken a picture of it for the family album. That would have been harmless. A little odd, maybe, but harmless. But that is not what she wanted. She wanted us to use it. Not eventually. Not after checking it. Not after thinking about it. Right there. In front of everyone. At my son's first birthday party. She wanted me to go out to the car, remove our current car seat, install hers, and then let her take pictures of my baby with it so she could have some sentimental little moment where she got to feel important and nostalgic and triumphant. And when I refused, she did not just sulk and go home. She made herself the victim. She dragged in the family. She tried to shame me. She demanded a public apology. She went on social media and lied about me. She deleted comments from people who defended me. And by the end of it, she had managed to do something I honestly did not think she would ever do. She pushed both of her children further away from her, all because her ego mattered more to her than my child's safety. So let me explain from the beginning, because the more I replay this whole thing in my head, the more unbelievable it feels. My husband and I had been planning our son's first birthday party for weeks. It was not anything over the top. We were not trying to throw some huge social media perfect event or prove anything to anybody. We just wanted a warm, happy day. A few friends, some family, food, cake, photos, the usual first birthday stuff. The kind of day you remember because your baby is giggling, people are laughing, and everyone is focused on celebrating that one tiny human being who somehow changed your entire life in a year. That was all I wanted. And because it was our son's first birthday, I was already emotional enough as it was. I had spent part of that morning looking at baby pictures on my phone and wondering how a year had gone by so fast. I had that weird mixture of exhaustion and gratitude that comes with early motherhood, where you still feel like you have barely caught your breath and yet somehow an entire chapter has already passed. I wanted that day to be peaceful. I wanted it to feel safe. I wanted it to feel joyful. Now, my mother-in-law, Helen, has always had a way of making important moments orbit around her. Some people do it loudly, with obvious tantrums. She does it more strategically. She likes to position herself as the emotional center of every situation. If someone else is happy, she has to be seen contributing to that happiness. If someone else is hurt, her pain has to somehow be larger. If someone else sets a boundary, she interprets it as an attack. So going into the party, I was already a little cautious. Not frightened, not expecting disaster, just cautious in the way you become around people who have taught you that every gathering has a hidden risk built into it. Still, I was trying to be positive. I always try to be fair where she is concerned. And I think that is important to say, because I know how easy it is for stories like this to sound one-sided. I am not one of those people who expects a mother-in-law to be perfect. I do not even expect us to be best friends. I just expect basic respect and common sense, especially where a child is concerned. Helen is a widow. She lives off what her husband left her, and yes, my husband helps her financially from time to time. He also helps her with other things because, frankly, she depends on him a lot. I know that. I have always known that. So I have never been somebody who expected her to show up with expensive gifts or grand gestures. If anything, I would have been perfectly fine if she had just come to the party empty-handed and spent quality time with her grandson. I mean that sincerely. Presents would have been enough. That is one of the reasons this whole thing made me so angry. It was never about money. Never. She could have brought a $5 toy, a little outfit, a storybook, or nothing at all. None of that would have bothered me. The problem was not price. The problem was that she brought something unsafe, demanded control, and then lied about why I objected. Anyway, the party started off fine. People were arriving, there was food out. My son was in one of those lovely moods where he was fascinated by everything and everyone, and for a while I actually relaxed. Helen arrived with a gift that was large and awkwardly shaped, and I remember thinking it looked strange, but I did not think much of it in that moment because birthdays are chaotic and you do not immediately assume the weirdest possible explanation. She came in already looking pleased with herself, which should have been my first warning sign. She had that expression she gets when she thinks she is about to do something dramatic and meaningful and be praised for it. If you know someone like that, you know the look. It is a sort of manufactured softness over obvious anticipation. She kept making little comments about how we had to open her gift while everyone was there. Not later. Not privately. Not after cake. Right then. She was weirdly insistent. At first I thought maybe she had gotten him something large or sentimental and wanted to see his reaction, even though he was one and obviously not going to grasp any of it. So eventually, to keep things moving, we opened it. The second I saw it, my whole brain just stalled. Because sitting there in front of me was this old car seat. Not a new one made to look retro. Not a collectible item displayed nicely. An actual old car seat. Faded. Stiff-looking. Clearly used. Clearly stored for years. And yes, there was rust on the metal parts. Enough that it caught my eye immediately. Enough that my first thought was not, how sweet. My first thought was, why is this here? I remember just staring at it for a second because I honestly thought she must be joking or maybe making some kind of symbolic gesture. My husband had the same look on his face. Complete confusion. It was such a bizarre thing to unwrap at a baby's birthday that for a split second it almost felt surreal. And then Helen started telling the story. She said it had been my husband's when he was little. Then she proudly added that his sister had used it too, as if that made it even more valuable. She went on about how expensive it had been back in the day, how it had been one of the top brands, how she only ever bought the best for her children, how well-made things used to be, how people today just waste money on replacing things too quickly. She was talking with this nostalgic pride, like she was revealing some treasured family artifact. And at first, I still gave her the benefit of the doubt. I truly did. I thought maybe she was handing us a memory. Maybe she wanted us to laugh, take a picture, talk about how times had changed. Weird, yes, but not malicious. Then she smiled at me and said she wanted me to switch out the current car seat in our car with this one right away so we could all go outside and she could take pictures. Not later. Not after cleaning it. Not after checking anything. Right away. There are moments when your mind can barely keep up with what someone is saying because it is so ridiculous that your brain keeps trying to reinterpret it into something normal. That was one of those moments for me. I actually thought I must have heard her wrong. But no. She kept talking. She said this was not just a regular gift. She said this was supposed to count as my son's big gift for the next 10 years, and that we should appreciate the emotional value of it until he turned 10 and then maybe she would give him something else meaningful. She said it like she was being generous. Like we should be grateful she had given us some sacred family treasure instead of modern junk. I could feel people listening. I could feel the room shift. When something strange happens in a family setting, everyone does this quiet emotional calculation at once. They are all pretending to be casual, but they are also all waiting to see who is going to challenge the weirdness first. I did not want to embarrass her. Even then, even at that exact moment, I was trying to preserve her dignity. So I smiled in that tight, polite way people do when they are trying not to create a scene and said something along the lines of, "Oh, we can sort that out later. Let's not keep everyone waiting." Any normal person would have understood that for what it was, a soft no. But Helen is not interested in soft no's. She hears hesitation and thinks it means she should push harder. So she said no, we should do it now. She said everyone could come outside and watch. She said it would be such a special moment. She said she wanted pictures. She said she wanted to see her grandson riding in the same seat her son once used. And that was when the whole thing stopped being weird and started becoming offensive. Because it was obvious by then that this was not about a gift. It was about control. She had not brought us an object. She had brought us a test. She wanted to see whether I would submit to her idea of what motherhood should look like. She wanted to insert herself into a parenting decision that had absolutely nothing to do with her. And she wanted witnesses. My husband jumped in at that point and tried to redirect things. He was calm, but I know him well enough to know when he is internally cringing. He said something like, "Mom, we already have a car seat. We can talk about this later." He was trying to save her from herself. But she did not let it go. She kept insisting. She said ours could be removed. She said hers was still perfectly good. She said things used to be built properly. She said this generation is paranoid. She said she had raised 2 children just fine. She said people today overreact about safety. She said all of it with that self-satisfied certainty some older people have when they think their survival of outdated practices automatically proves those practices were safe. I cannot explain to you how enraging that mindset is once you become a parent. Because raising a child does not mean nothing bad almost happened. It does not mean standards did not change for a reason. It does not mean luck equals wisdom. It definitely does not mean I should ignore everything we know now just to flatter your nostalgia. At that point I was still trying to keep my voice even, but internally I was crossing a line from confused to furious. Not because she had brought a dumb gift, but because she was treating my child's safety like a sentimental costume she could dress him in for her own satisfaction. And the more she pushed, the more impossible it became to stay polite. I could see people starting to get uncomfortable. Some were avoiding eye contact. Some were hovering nearby pretending to rearrange food or check on the baby while obviously listening. My husband was trying to shut it down without blowing it up. I was standing there holding my son, feeling that familiar pressure women are expected to absorb in family situations, where everyone silently hopes you will just smooth it over even when someone else is behaving horribly. I tried one more time. I told her, as evenly as I could, that we appreciated the thought, but we were not going to switch the car seats during the party. I was hoping that would be enough. It was not. She kept going. She said I was dismissing her gift. She said I was acting like it was worthless. She said I had no idea what quality looked like. She said I should be grateful she had kept something so special for so many years. And finally, because there was no graceful escape left and because I was not going to let my silence be mistaken for agreement, I said the truth as plainly as possible. I told her that the reason we were not using it was because it was old, visibly worn, had rust on it, and I considered it a safety hazard. I said there was no way I was putting my baby in it. That should have ended the discussion. A reasonable person would have been embarrassed, maybe a little defensive, maybe disappointed, but ultimately able to understand that a baby's safety is not negotiable. Helen did not react like a reasonable person. The second I said it out loud, she looked wounded in this dramatic, theatrical way, like I had slapped her across the face instead of refusing a decades-old car seat. Her expression changed instantly from proud presenter to crushed martyr. She started saying I was insulting her. She said I did not know how to value meaningful gifts. She said she was just a grandmother trying to do something nice. She said I was being materialistic and ungrateful. That accusation made me see red. Materialistic? Over a rusted car seat? I had not asked her for anything. I had not complained about anything. I had not demanded something newer or nicer or more expensive. I had literally just refused to use an unsafe object on my child. But that is how people like Helen survive confrontation. They change the subject. They turn the issue from "I crossed a line" into "you hurt my feelings." They make the person drawing the boundary look cruel so they never have to examine the actual behavior. She went on and on, loud enough for everyone to hear, about how she was a poor grandmother trying her best. She made herself sound pitiful. She made me sound cold. She framed the whole thing like I had rejected her love, not her rusted relic. And even then, I still tried not to completely lose my temper. Because this was my son's birthday. Because guests were there. Because my baby was in my arms. Because I knew once something was said in front of everyone, there was no taking it back. My husband stepped in again and told her she was dragging things out and needed to stop. He was clearly embarrassed. I actually appreciated that he did not try to both sides it. He could see exactly how inappropriate this was. He knew that car seat should never be used. He knew she was escalating for attention. But Helen would not stop. She kept whining, complaining, muttering about disrespect, making little wounded noises, looking around for sympathy from the rest of the family. And I just hit my limit. I told her that I had not wanted to make her feel bad, but if she genuinely expected us to use that thing, then she was being completely unreasonable. I told her she was trying to make us feel guilty for doing the obvious, rational thing, and that was not fair. Then I told her that if she was so offended that she wanted to leave, she was free to leave, because we were not going to spend our son's first birthday standing there in a driveway debating whether a rusty old car seat belonged in our vehicle. The second I said that, the room went dead in that awful family drama way where nobody moves for a moment because everyone knows the real break has happened. She stared at me like I had confirmed every terrible thing she had ever wanted to believe about me. Then she grabbed onto that line, the "you can leave" line, like it was gold. Suddenly she had her grand exit. Suddenly she was the wounded elder being thrown out by the cruel daughter-in-law. She huffed, she gathered herself, she made sure everyone understood she was leaving because she was too insulted to stay, and then she stormed off. And just like that, my son's first birthday had been split in two. There was the party before the car seat, and the party after. After she left, we tried to continue. We cut the cake. We thanked people for coming. We smiled. But the atmosphere had changed. It is very hard to recover a celebration once one person has forced everyone to witness an ugly power struggle. People were polite, but the warmth had drained out of the room. Some guests left earlier than they probably would have. Others acted awkward. Conversations felt thinner. And the whole time I was trying not to cry from frustration because I knew exactly what had happened. She had taken a day that was supposed to belong to my son and bent it toward herself. That alone would have been enough to make me furious. But it did not end there. Of course it did not. Over the next several days, messages started coming in. At first it was subtle. A relative checking in. Someone asking if everything was okay. Someone saying Helen seemed upset. Then the tone shifted. Suddenly I was getting these passive-aggressive little lectures from people on my husband's side of the family. People telling me they had heard I had disrespected Helen. People saying they were disappointed in me. People hinting that I should apologize. People acting as though I had publicly humiliated a sweet old woman over a harmless gift. The thing that really got me was that some of these people had not even been there. They had not seen the car seat. They had not heard what she said. They had not watched her insist we install it. They had not watched her perform outrage when I refused. They were reacting entirely to her version, which I already knew had to be wildly twisted. That realization actually calmed me down a little at first, because once I figured out that most of these people were just operating off secondhand nonsense, I stopped feeling personally wounded and started feeling deeply unsurprised. This is what people like Helen do. They do not just argue with you. They recruit. They need an audience. They need backup. They need the comforting illusion that if enough people repeat their version, it becomes the truth. My husband and I talked about it and decided we were not going to respond to any of it. Not to the relatives, not to the guilt trips, not to the whisper campaign. We figured the smartest thing to do was refuse to feed it. Because from our side, the issue was simple. We were not putting a baby in a rusted decades-old car seat. There was no world in which that was up for debate. So why dignify the madness with a whole trial? For a few days, that seemed like the right call. Then Helen shifted tactics. She started leaning on my husband directly. Not with apologies, obviously. With guilt. She told him she was all alone. She told him he was her only son and should be supporting her instead of letting his wife mistreat her. She told him she was heartbroken. She told him he had changed. She told him I was disrespectful. She told him he was abandoning her. And perhaps most ridiculous of all, she decided that because I had publicly disrespected her at the party, I now needed to publicly apologize on social media so everyone could see that I was sorry. That was her demand. A public apology. Because in her mind, this had become some grand issue of honor. Not safety. Not boundaries. Honor. Reputation. Obedience. I remember just staring at my husband when he told me that, because it was so transparent. She did not care about reconciliation. If she had, she could have reached out privately and said, things got out of hand. She did not want peace. She wanted submission. She wanted me to kneel to her version of reality and announce it publicly. And the more I thought about that, the more I saw the deeper pattern in her behavior. Helen has always been strangely possessive of my husband. Not in an inappropriate way exactly, but in the exhausting emotional way some mothers are with their sons, where the son is treated like a source of identity, loyalty, and rescue. She has a daughter too, my sister-in-law, but the difference in how she treats them has always been obvious. My sister-in-law has spent years trying to win the kind of softness and attention Helen gives my husband automatically. It is honestly sad to watch. Even at the party, when Helen started her dramatic act, my sister-in-law had tried to comfort her, and Helen practically ignored her until my husband stepped in. That tells you everything. So when Helen started playing the only son card, I was not shocked. She uses motherhood like currency. She cashes it in whenever she wants obedience. To my relief, my husband did not fall for it. He was hurt. He was embarrassed. He was angry. But he was not confused. He knew what happened. He had seen the car seat. He had heard her insist on using it. He had watched the whole performance unfold in real time. So while he was not going to fully cut her off, especially because she does rely on him, he did start pulling back. Less contact. Less responsiveness. Less patience. And honestly, I did not want him to abandon her completely either. Maybe that makes me softer than I should be. But I am not somebody who enjoys watching people be isolated, even when they are difficult. I did not want to become the reason he severed ties with his mother. I just wanted boundaries. I wanted reality. I wanted her to stop acting like she was entitled to run our household and our parenting decisions. Unfortunately, silence did not make her stop. About 9 days after the party, my phone started blowing up. Not 1 or 2 notifications. A flood of them. At first I thought maybe something had happened in the family, some emergency or crisis. But the messages all had the same basic tone. Have you seen Facebook? You need to look at what Helen posted. Please go check. I already knew. Before I even opened the app, I knew she had done something performative and ugly. And she had. She had posted several pictures of the three of us together, me, her, and my husband, smiling in happier moments, and then written this long dramatic caption about how I had broken her heart, how I had been turning her son against her, how she had tried to do something kind and meaningful and I had humiliated her. Paragraph after paragraph of victimhood. But the part that actually made my hands shake was this: she claimed I rejected the gift because it was not expensive enough. She framed me as greedy, materialistic, money-minded. Like I had thrown a tantrum because I did not get a shiny new item. That lie hit me harder than the rest of it. Because it was such a deliberate distortion. It was not a misunderstanding. It was not poor phrasing. It was a lie designed to make me look shallow and cruel, because I refused to put my child in a rusty old car seat makes her look insane, while my daughter-in-law is a greedy brat who disrespected me gives people something easier to judge and gossip about. And I hate that kind of lie more than almost anything. If you are hurt, say you are hurt. If you are angry, say you are angry. But do not invent motives for me that make you easier to pity. So I commented on her post. I kept it simple. I said that I had no issue with sentiment, but the reason we refused to use the car seat was because it was old, visibly rusted, and unsafe. I repeated exactly what I had said at the party. No insults. No theatrics. Just the truth. At the same time, my husband tried to reach her privately. He called. He texted. He told her to take the post down because this was not acceptable. She ignored him. Completely. Which is funny, if you think about it, because when she wanted a response, we were monsters for not engaging, but when we finally did try to engage, suddenly silence was her favorite weapon. A few hours later, my comment disappeared. Deleted. And not just mine. People who were trying to defend me, especially people who had actually been at the party and knew what happened, had their comments deleted too. She was curating the narrative. She wanted sympathy, not truth. She wanted a courtroom where only her witnesses could speak. By then, I realized there was no dignified way to remain invisible. I had hoped this would stay within the family, because despite everything, I do not enjoy public conflict. But she had already made it public. And if she was going to drag my name through the mud with outright lies, I was not going to stand there and let silence become an admission. So I made my own post. I explained exactly what happened. I said she had gifted us an old car seat from my husband's childhood. I said she demanded we install it at the party. I said we refused because it was unsafe. I said the issue had nothing to do with money, and that I would have been happy if she had brought nothing at all. I did not attack her personally. I did not call her names. I just laid out the facts. And then, because apparently she could not even tolerate my version existing at the same time as hers, she blocked me. It would have been funny if it were not so exhausting. At that point, the family split exactly the way families always do in these situations. A few people believed her no matter what because some relatives will always side with the older person by default. Some stayed neutral because neutrality is easier than honesty. And a smaller group, mostly people who had actually seen the event happen, supported me. I was not thrilled that the numbers were not on my side, but by then I honestly did not care as much as I thought I would. There is something clarifying about being misrepresented so aggressively. You stop trying to win everyone. You start noticing who values truth over convenience. And then something happened that genuinely surprised me. My sister-in-law took my side publicly. That mattered for two reasons. First, because she had been there. Second, because siding against Helen was not some casual choice for her. This was her mother, and their relationship had always been complicated in painful ways that were obvious to anyone paying attention. So when I saw her comment under my post saying she knew what really happened and that I had nothing to apologize for, I was shocked. I called her after I saw it because I honestly wanted to thank her and also make sure she was okay. I figured she must be bracing for fallout. And that was when I learned something important. Apparently, in the days after the party, while Helen was busy painting herself as the victim to everyone else, she had also started acting unusually nice to her daughter. Not warmer in a real way. More like strategic. Almost as if she suddenly remembered she had another child who could be useful if her son started pulling away. My sister-in-law saw right through it. She told me it was almost insulting how transparent it was. Years of coolness, favoritism, and emotional distance, and now suddenly, because her relationship with my husband was strained, Helen wanted to play affectionate mother to her daughter. That was the moment, according to my sister-in-law, when something in her finally snapped into place. She realized she had spent too much of her life chasing a kind of approval that was never going to come cleanly. Not without strings. Not without performance. Not without being useful. So she confronted her. And when Helen still would not back down, still would not admit the truth, still would not stop making me the villain, my sister-in-law told her she was done. She told her she would not speak to her unless she made things right. When she told me that, I felt two things at once. First, gratitude. Deep gratitude, because it meant a lot that she was willing to stand up publicly when she knew how ugly Helen could get. Second, sadness. Because underneath all this ridiculous drama over a car seat was something much bigger and much uglier, a woman whose need for control had damaged both of her relationships with her children in different ways. For a little while after that, things went quiet. And I mean quiet in that eerie family drama sense where you know the issue is not resolved, but the visible flames have died down. Helen's post slowly stopped getting attention. My own post had already served its purpose, so I took it down because I did not want my page turning into some archive of family nonsense. Eventually, I heard that she had taken hers down too. For one brief moment, I thought maybe she had finally understood how ugly all of this had become. Not fully. Not enough to apologize, obviously. But enough to stop performing it. I was wrong. A little while later, my husband told me she had reached out to him again. She had unblocked him and sent him this self-righteous message saying she was appalled that even after everything that had happened, I was still too proud to acknowledge my mistake and apologize. She said she was shocked by our audacity. She said she could not believe that after so many people had agreed with her, I was still refusing to admit I was wrong. That part almost made me laugh. As if truth becomes false because enough relatives repeat a lie. Then she brought out her favorite weapon, age. She said that as an elderly person, she deserved respect. She said it was horrifying that I could not give her even that much. She said my husband was forgetting that she was his mother and allowing me to insult her. Then, because she has no sense of proportion whatsoever, she implied that if I could disrespect her like this, there was no limit to what I might do in the future, that this was me showing my true colors, and that he should take it seriously. For context, my husband and I had been together for 6 years and married for 4. If he had not figured out my true colors by then, I think we had bigger problems than his mother's Facebook drama. He did not reply. Neither of us did. Because what is there to say to somebody who has built an entire castle out of her own ego and is now demanding you move into it with her? There is no argument that works when the other person is not defending facts. They are defending identity. In Helen's mind, apologizing would not just mean admitting she was wrong about the car seat. It would mean accepting that she is not automatically entitled to obedience just because she is the mother. And that is a much bigger loss to people like her than any public embarrassment. So I stepped back. I remember getting to a point where I just felt done. Not triumphant. Not vindicated. Done. I had a child to raise. I had a business to work on. I had a real life. I did not want to keep devoting emotional energy to a woman who kept choosing drama over dignity. There is a point where someone else's dysfunction stops being a crisis and starts being background noise, and I was desperate to reach that point. And for a couple of weeks, we barely heard anything. That silence was strange, mostly because Helen is not good at silence. She usually needs something. A ride somewhere. Help with finances. Someone to listen. Some tiny emergency that somehow becomes urgent. So when the silence stretched out, my husband and I both started wondering what exactly was going on. Eventually, he asked his sister. And that was when the final piece clicked into place. Helen had not changed. She had simply adapted. She knew that if she came to us for help, especially to my husband, there would be tension. She also knew that if she wanted her daughter's help now, she had to soften herself just enough to get it. So instead of apologizing to the people she had wronged, she had started buttering up my sister-in-law whenever she needed something. Not because she had suddenly become loving. Because she had run the numbers and realized she needed an available child. When I heard that, I was not even angry anymore. I just felt this cold, tired clarity. Because that, more than the party, more than the Facebook post, more than the fake heartbreak, was the truest thing about her. The way she moved people around emotionally according to use. The way affection appeared when leverage required it. The way accountability never entered the equation unless there was absolutely no alternative left. My sister-in-law told us she had basically forgiven her enough to help when asked, but not enough to forget what had happened. She was no longer chasing her approval. She was no longer under the illusion that if she just loved harder or yielded more, her mother would suddenly become fair. She helped because she is a decent person, not because Helen had earned some restored moral standing. And honestly, that was the most meaningful outcome of the whole thing. Not the family gossip. Not the posts. Not the side-taking. Not even the fact that my husband backed me up, though that mattered deeply. The most meaningful thing was that the entire ugly spectacle finally exposed Helen's patterns so clearly that even the people most conditioned to excuse them could not fully unsee them anymore. I think that is why this whole mess bothers me less now than it did in the beginning. At first, I was furious because she ruined my son's birthday atmosphere. Then I was furious because she lied about me. Then I was furious because she tried to recruit the family and weaponize public opinion. But eventually, it stopped feeling like she was winning anything. Because what did she actually gain? She got a temporary surge of sympathy from people who love drama more than truth. She got a few comments validating her. She got to feel righteous for a little while. And in exchange, she lost something real. She damaged her son's trust. She exposed her favoritism to her daughter. She made herself look unstable to people who were actually present. She turned what could have been a quiet, embarrassing misunderstanding into a public case study in manipulation. And most importantly, she taught me something I will never forget where my child is concerned: never soften a boundary just because someone older than you dresses their control up as love. That is the real issue. That is what sits at the core of all this. A lot of family conflict survives because younger people are pressured to confuse deference with respect. We are expected to smile at nonsense, accept emotional blackmail, and call it peace. We are expected to let older relatives mean well our children into unsafe, inappropriate, or outdated situations because confronting them would be rude. I do not believe that anymore. Respect does not mean compliance. Love does not mean access without limits. Sentiment does not override safety. And being older does not make someone right. If anything, the older you are, the more embarrassing it should be to throw a public fit because a parent refused to endanger her own child to satisfy your nostalgia. And let me be very clear, I do not regret refusing that car seat. I do not regret saying it was unsafe. I do not regret refusing to put my son in it for even 1 second, not for a photo, not for a gesture, not to keep the peace. I do not regret making her uncomfortable with reality. The only thing I regret is that I spent even a few minutes trying so hard to protect the feelings of someone who had absolutely no interest in protecting my position as a mother. Because that is what stings when I look back. Not her tantrum. Not the gossip. Not the Facebook theatrics. It is the fact that I was still trying to be gracious while she was already staging a power play. I think a lot of women know exactly what that feels like. You are trying to keep a room calm while someone else is actively setting the room on fire. You are lowering your voice while they are raising theirs. You are choosing your words carefully while they are choosing impact. You are trying not to embarrass them while they are perfectly willing to embarrass you. And then later, somehow, people act like the conflict just happened between both sides. No. Some conflicts are mutual. This was not. This was one person bringing a ridiculous and unsafe object into a child's birthday party, demanding public compliance, refusing every polite exit, and then punishing the mother for not surrendering. And the reason I say that so firmly now is because I spent enough time second-guessing myself in the early days. Not about the safety issue. Never that. But about the tone. The timing. The wording. The could I have said it more gently spiral people, especially women, get dragged into after someone else behaves badly. Could I have been softer? Maybe. Would it have changed the outcome? No. Because the problem was never that I was too harsh. The problem was that I did not obey. That is all. If I had smiled, nodded, taken the seat outside, and played along for a photograph, she would have interpreted that as victory. She would have learned that if she pushed hard enough in public, I would cave. And if you give people like that one success, they build on it. Next time it is not a car seat. It is diet, discipline, routines, holidays, school choices, medical advice, everything. The issue was bigger than the seat from the second she made it a demand. So no, I do not feel guilty anymore. I feel informed. I feel certain. And maybe most importantly, I feel grateful that my husband saw it too. Because these stories become tragedies when the spouse refuses to see the pattern. When they beg for peace at any cost. When they ask the reasonable person to absorb more nonsense because that's just how mom is. I have seen that happen in other families, and it destroys marriages from the inside. Bit by bit. Boundary by boundary. My husband did not do that. He was embarrassed, yes. He was hurt, yes. He was conflicted in the sense that nobody likes realizing their parent is being unreasonable. But he did not gaslight me. He did not downplay the safety issue. He did not tell me to apologize just to make it go away. He stood where he should have stood, and that matters more than I can explain. It also mattered to me that my son was too young to remember any of this. That thought comforted me a lot afterwards. He will never remember the atmosphere changing. He will never remember his grandmother making his birthday about herself. He will never remember the messages, the posts, the divided family commentary. He only knows he had cake, people smiled at him, and he was loved. And maybe that is the best revenge of all in situations like this, refusing to let somebody else's dysfunction become your child's emotional inheritance. Because I will not do that. I will not pass down this culture of forced gratitude and manipulated silence. If my son ever has children of his own one day, I hope he never doubts that their safety comes before my feelings. I hope he never has to wonder whether I will make his milestones about me. I hope he never feels trapped between protecting his family and soothing my ego. That alone is enough to make me determined to be different. And as for Helen, I honestly do not know whether she will ever fully understand what she did. Maybe one day, when the dust has settled and attention has moved on and she is sitting alone with no applause and no audience and no comment section telling her she was right, maybe then it will hit her. Maybe she will realize that what she called disrespect was actually resistance. Maybe she will realize that love cannot be bullied out of people. Maybe she will understand that being included in your adult child's life is not a right you defend with guilt and spectacle. It is a privilege you preserve with humility. Or maybe she will never get there. Some people would rather live inside a lie that flatters them than face one truth that humbles them. If that is who she chooses to be, then that is her burden, not mine. I have already made my peace with what happened. I protected my child. I told the truth. I refused to be publicly manipulated. And when she tried to turn the family against me, she ended up exposing herself to the very people whose loyalty she thought she could control. So if you ask me how this story ends, it does not end with some dramatic apology, because life is not always neat like that. It does not end with her falling to her knees and admitting I was right. It ends in a way that is much more real than that. It ends with distance. It ends with people seeing her more clearly. It ends with her son pulling back. It ends with her daughter finally stopping the chase. It ends with her learning, whether she admits it or not, that she cannot force her way into a mother's decisions by turning herself into a victim. And all of that happened because she looked at a rusty old car seat from decades ago and decided her nostalgia mattered more than my baby's safety. That is the choice she made. Not me. I made a different one. I chose my son. And I would choose him again every single time. Why this rewritten version is stronger than the original. This new version hits harder because it does these things more deliberately. It sharpens the opening. It opens with immediate danger, humiliation, and a promise of retaliation. It deepens the visuals. The car seat is no longer just old and rusty. It feels tangible, ugly, and unsafe. It improves narrator credibility. The script repeatedly shows fairness, restraint, and reason before anger. It gives Helen clearer psychological patterns. She is not just dramatic. She is shown as someone who needs witnesses, reframes boundaries as cruelty, recruits others, edits narratives, confuses obedience with respect. It increases immersion. The listener can feel the room shift, the party split in two, the notifications flood in, the emotional calculation happening in the family. It gives the ending more emotional consequence. Instead of a flat ending, it lands on the real punishment. Loss of trust. Loss of authority. Exposure. Distance. Clean structure of the new 60 to 65-minute script. If you want to reuse this format for future revenge story scripts, here is the exact structure underneath it. 1. Shock hook. Start with the single most outrageous image and the consequence. 2. Moral frame. Make it instantly clear why the narrator is right without sounding preachy. 3. Calm setup. Show the normal event that was supposed to happen. 4. Strange object reveal. Introduce one unforgettable concrete symbol. 5. False hope. Let the audience think maybe it is sentimental, not malicious. 6. Demand. Reveal that the villain wants compliance, not appreciation. 7. Social pressure scene. Add witnesses, embarrassment, and escalating insistence. 8. Boundary. The narrator finally says the clear truth. 9. Villain inversion. The villain reframes themselves as the victim. 10. Fallout. Family messaging, guilt, smear campaign. 11. Public escalation. Social media, lies, comment deletion, reputation attack. 12. Ally reveal. Someone unexpected supports the narrator. 13. Pattern exposure. The conflict reveals the villain's deeper character. 14. Emotional consequence. Distance, trust broken, control lost. 15. Final moral landing. End on a line about choosing safety, dignity, truth, or self-respect.